Hello and welcome. I'm Sean Dubay.
And I'm Patrick Quinlan.
And this is Supporting Actors, a podcast about the art, business, and craft of acting from the perspective of two sometimes working actors.
And today we're going to be talking about all things acting theories, techniques, and tear sticks.
Right, but before we get to weeping, we're going to talk about something that we can celebrate, and that is pilot season's back. So that's kind of exciting. I find this to be exciting because back prior to streaming, if you're relatively new to the industry and you've probably heard about pilots and pilot season, pilots were when networks would try out the first episode of a season that got pitched to them, and they were like interested, but they didn't want to commit yet, right? And it's a smarter way for them to try a variety of things and give more opportunities, right, to earlier.
Yeah.
That's the way that I see it. What makes me excited about it is that like not all of these shows are going to get picked up, and that is a bummer. But there's more opportunities now for a wider variety of actors, which is great because like it will dilute some of what we talked about in the first episode or what we've talked about in the past about how like the same A-list actors are saying yes to everything. Well, pilot season kind of makes it so they can't do that, which is awesome because that opens up a lot of opportunities further down the bandwagon. And then we get a bunch of great new shows, or sometimes okay shows, or sometimes really bad ones that you wonder why it got picked. But it's opportunity, though, either way.
Yeah, it's interesting because, it's right now we're about to hit like May, so we're almost at summertime. So pilot season historically, it was like mid-January through April, maybe, like where when in its heyday, they would be a ton of shows would be going into production at the same time, which, like Sean mentioned, would allow opportunities for other actors for them to take a risk because people just weren't available because they were working on something else. And then some networks have experimented with foregoing pilot season and just picking up shows straight to series. That proved pretty expensive. It also, I think, made for safer choices or not as much variety, and so you had fewer surprises. And then with streaming, I think before the pandemic or coming out of the pandemic, the idea was maybe pilot seasons all year round, but they still moved away from, with the consolidation of things, just moved away from creating pilots, funding pilots, greenlighting pilots. And so it's exciting that it's back because there's just, another thing to try to audition for and to get on and get some reps in. So.
Right. And I think like some of the advice that I heard early on was you want to try to get onto a first season of a show, right? If it's going to be network, if you can get onto the first season, that's great. Because if it's a hit, people are always going to go back to rewatch that first season, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of residuals, and just from a business perspective, it like is kind of smart. So you've worked on a couple of pilots, right? Like you've had that.
Yeah.
Like I kind of got here right as that was winding down, and we were getting into the like everything all the time. So I haven't had the experience of working on a pilot. But what was that? Was it kind of cagey where you'd get something that was like half written that's changing, or was it kind of like you'd get there and you're like, all right, no, we're making a thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, gosh, now you're making me think of, there is a great indie film called The TV Set with David Duchovny,
Hmm.
and he is a writer doing a pilot. And that was I think it came out in the early 2010s or something. And I watched it. I've watched it a couple times. That was like what everyone said. This is the experience of a pilot. I've never done like a sitcom pilot or even a network TV pilot. I booked some premium cable pilots. So I think um the process was a little bit different, a little bit more like every other show, though. um though in there was one job that I was really excited about. It was for a pilot for FX, and it was called Gone Hollywood. And they had an incredible cast, and it was all set in a 1980s like LA talent agency.
Mm.
and I was one of the junior agents. So me and like seven other actors we all had a few moments in the whole pilot, but we were also in the background. So it was kind of like booking Mad Men, which would have been, so exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, when that pilot came out. So the idea was like, oh, well, we only have a few things to say here, but if this pilot goes, that'll be so exciting because we're just always in the background. And they built an amazing set. It was so cool. It was period. We shot it in Pasadena, and it was a week of work of just hanging out as they were doing scene by scene because they never knew who they'd have to populate in the background type
Mm.
thing. That was really exciting. But so that one was, I got to read the whole script. I think I got that through. I don't think they gave it to us. I think I had to pull some favors and um, reach out to people who um, knew the material either from a class or from another actor auditioning. I got to read the script and then had an in-person audition. And I know I was like, I can
Those
still remember it
dinosaurs. Yeah. Right.
because
Yeah.
the reason this is memorable, I suppose, for me is just that we found out it wasn't going. I'm pretty sure that was pandemic, like it was just starting. So like that's when I was like, oh damn it, because it seemed like it had everything going for it in terms of the people behind it making it and the stars that were in it. But it was a cool experience to be on a pilot for sure. And there's definitely excitement to be in a first season when everyone's still kind of figuring out what it is, what the tone of the show is, um, and or booking the job that might be like a finale or something like that is kind of exciting because people tune in, but the process is roughly the same. It's just a lot of people are there to make a thing that day, and you're lucky to be there type thing.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, hopefully we get that experience again in the future, and it's something that sticks around because, yeah, as for all the reasons you said, it was great for variety. It was great for opportunity, and they're fun, right? They are exciting to be on those sets. I've
Yeah,
worked it
well,
as
and
background.
and people are reading up on the pilot, so it's always great to talk, like to book a pilot, and it's been announced in the paper, in the
Yeah,
in the trades. So it's versus it's just as thrilling and rewarding and worth it to book a show that's in its fifth, sixth, seventh season. But I suppose the newness, the novelty of something is a little more cachet, I suppose.
for sure, for sure. Well, let's dive into our marquee topic for the day, which is looking at acting philosophies. So there's a lot of them out there, and I think in order to kind of really understand how we kind of got into this landscape of like different acting philosophies, we should do a quick little history lesson back onto what was happening in Russia back with Stanislavski and kind of like the father of this whole thing.
What was happening?
So in Russia, Stanislavski was working on a play called The Seagull, which I'm sure you've heard of because it's everyone's heard of it. Anton Chekhov, and
Hmm.
the style of acting at the time was very big, right? So kind of think about Greek tragedies, Greek comedies. Like there's a chorus. Brecht is like another one of these playwrights from this time, right? Just big, abstract, kind of like heightened acting. And the sequel came out, and Stanislavski wasn't really. He recognized that that style of acting wasn't going to be appropriate for this play, and the play was going to be its best if the actors can be really natural. So they worked on it for like 3 years, slowly developing uh, not the system as it came to be, but just like finding naturalistic ways of saying this dialogue. And it kind of like blew everybody's minds when they saw it because then you got this like private moment in public. People were watching something they shouldn't have been watching, right? Like that was the sensation that that play gave, and it's still a sensation that good plays give today. And that he took that to the United States at some point, right? And um, over the years of working on that play, he realized that you can't take 3 years to rehearse something. We need to find a way to make this more efficient. how do we get people to this naturalistic style of acting faster? And that's where he kind of came up with the system, which is his approach to solving that problem, which was kind of a scene analysis, kind of more cerebral, enter through empathy kind of approach. And at the time, he was very keen on using sense memory and like emotional recall from like traumatic life events to kind of propel some of the drama forward on stage. And that's kind of where some of that came. So when they brought these plays to the United States eventually, and again, crazy sold out crowds, and it created the desire for people to learn how to do that here. So the group theater had him here, and um, he was starting to teach his method here in the United States. And that's where we kind of get the big four and kind of where they come from, which would be Stella Adler, Uta Hagen, uh, Meisner, and Strasberg, right? So like these are now names that we hear kind of regularly. They're the American uh, propagators of like each has their own version of a Stanislavski system, right? Like each one of these like greats kind of took what worked for them, realized that they could make something out of it, and then ultimately went on to train a bunch of successful actors of their own.
Yeah, it's like an interpretation, right? Like of what they felt was the most important from that. But I think there's
Yeah.
also some overlap too of those. I mean, I guess you could say like Stanislavski was, it's like a coaching tree in sports today or something, right? It would be like the Bill Belichick or like how does
Yeah,
that?
or I would say maybe like even like the Bill Parcells, right? Like
Oh yeah, sure.
he's like so if you're not an NFL fan, he's like the coach that like all modern coaches come from, right?
Yeah.
Right in the NFL, and he kind of like uh, pioneered a way of coaching that has transformed the game. But yeah, so I would say that that would be probably an appropriate analogy where
And
yeah
we
he
could,
just yeah, he came up with with the system, right? And but even with these four, there were some differences between them, right? Like Uta Hagen didn't believe in using your imagination, right? Or sorry, Stella Adler didn't believe in using sense memory.
mhm.
So it was, this stuff should be fueled from your imagination. That's going to be much more rich, which is something that Slanovsky later in his life agreed with her. As he saw enough actors struggle with personal trauma and not get over things and like deal with drinking issues or drug issues, that he was like, maybe it's not great to be interacting with trauma in this way that creates more
Right.
trauma in some cases, right? Obviously, like that is a method that is still used. It is the method in some cases, and it's can be an effective tool. But they started to kind of get away from that, and they stopped teaching it later in life with the Stanislavski system.
Which well we can, so
Yeah,
we have Stella Adler who's she's pushing imagination. We have Uta Hagen who's using that sort of substitution, for lack of a better word, like that actors use, substitute something from your past maybe, but also having people explore behavior, and like that's sort of the idea of like you go out and you watch people at cafe and you pick up on behaviors and you borrow from them.
yeah,
um and then we have Meisner, who I spent I know personally I've spent the most time with that technique. And it's all about listening. The repetition is the big thing, the idea of repeating to show that you're listening, and then just bringing it out from you through that, through the dialogue, right, through your own behavior, the
yeah.
truth, I suppose.
It's a way of awakening impulse, I think.
Yeah, being spontaneous, and also there's imagination there too, like because
Yeah,
it gets beyond that repetition. When all of these people, I think they're solving the same problem in a different way, and they end up kind of coming to the same solution. And Strasberg, of course, emotional recall and memories, but at the
and we should say for Strasberg is most famous for the method, right? Like for method acting,
yes,
right? Where
that's
like
what we think of.
you are the character. You're not playing
Which
a character, you are, right? So
and so like to the person who's just hears jokes about the method actor, I think, what would you correlate that with today? Because certainly the method has been used and misnamed throughout
Yeah.
even the process, but I feel like it's like Adrian Brody and the pianist. He went and he lived on the streets and he personally experienced the feeling of homelessness to bring that to that emotional truth and memory to
Yeah,
the
but
pianist, I guess.
I would almost call that research though, and not necessarily method acting,
Right.
right? Because it's like if
Sure.
you don't, and we'll get into these things later with our own personal journeys with acting and what our philosophies are. But I think like that's the kind of thing where it's like if you don't understand something, it's your job to develop that understanding. And hopefully you don't have to go to the extreme of like dipping your toe in this something crazy, but there are cases where that might be what you need, and that's ultimately like where you need to learn your instrument and know what you need to get to the level that you want to go, right? But that's also where some imagination can help.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can get really relaxed, do a meditation, and kind of connect through empathy to these things. And you might not need to go live on the street for however long you did.
Well, that's
But yeah,
the Marathon Man story, right?
yeah, right. Well, I
Where
mean, there's so
Dustin
many too,
Hoffman.
like Daniel Day Lewis staying in a prison, right? And like there's not a shortage of actors doing research in that way.
No, but then the question is like where I guess where does it become research and where is it are you bringing it to set and living
Yeah.
with it?
S-
Um
So for
so
me, I think method, it's almost like emotional catharsis through character, right?
mhm.
Uh, it is kind of how I see it, where it's a lot more about like, I don't know, it's like, it's tricky because I find the method to be very difficult to talk about. And like, I've studied it a little bit, and have certainly read a lot about it to kind of like, to just out of curiosity, but it is still like one of these things that's difficult to talk about because it is so misconstrued in media and it's been so like uh, misappropriated, right? With some of the things that you hear that either happened or didn't, but they certainly were part of PR.
Yeah, well
Yeah.
that's like an interesting thing about these theories, I guess, because they're still pretty relevant today. I think when you move to if you move to Los Angeles or you move to New York, you might be electing to take a class at a studio where the teacher of that studio studied with one of these
Mhm.
greats in their youth, probably toward the end of that person's tenure. That I've met a couple people like that where it's like
Yep.
they're essentially 1 degree removed from that, and they've adapted it and moved it. But the so Stanislavski wanted to create this realism. The group takes it on. They do it with some Clifford Odets plays. Then they go off and they do their own thing. And in the 60s and 70s, they get just a ton of actors who are in their 20s, like just living the life of studying acting all day and going on auditions. And you have Brando and um, what Robert Duvall and uh, um, Al Pacino, all these incredible actors, and
Paul
realism is
Newman.
the
Yep.
thing. Paul Newman, yeah, Paul Newman, and it's interesting, like something you said earlier about in Russia, like they'd never seen anything like this private moment in public. I think about it now just because like 60s or 70s we have this realism and we still kind of just have that. Like there haven't been necessarily these uh big breakthroughs but in the mainstream of like this is a new style of acting or this is a new thing. But now we have so much performance in our real life, like so much we're constantly performing and performing for people through our phones. I wonder, I guess, where the next filmmaker, the next theater director takes some inspiration from just the way we're communicating so different and living our lives so publicly.
Yeah, I don't know where you go from being natural. Although it's like it's gotten to the point now where natural is kind of easy for all of us because like the
Right.
teaching methodology, the teaching pedagogy has gotten so good, right? They've
And a lot of
really
us are in therapy now.
that's that's right. Yeah. um, and if not, we probably should be. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I became an
After
actor.
all, we do want to be actors. um, but I think that yeah, naturalism is now no longer the bar, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
floor. So like then where do
Yeah.
you go? And I think it's, there is now it seems like how do you bring that to genre, right? Like
Mm.
how do you make genre believable or how do you find truth in these moments that are absurd? And I think that's kind of where things have been getting pushed. I know personally for me, a lot of my approach now is like rooted in clown even
Hmm.
if it's a super dramatic role because that commitment to absurdity is um, a great tool, right? And it's something that well, I don't even know where I'm going with this.
Well, no,
Yeah,
I think so. If we've covered kind of the big Western philosophies,
yeah,
very short, very quickly, but there's certainly other, especially in theater, other like complementary techniques, right?
sure,
So you mentioned clown. Um, uh, we've talked both about viewpoints,
yep,
not on the pod, but off the pod, which is a movement based ensemble building technique for like having sort of spatial awareness and creating visual iconography for
yep.
an audience. I like you like clown. I like Laban. Have you ever heard of this?
I've done it. Yeah,
Oh, you've done it. Oh,
yeah,
cool.
yeah. Those,
I love. I've tried to remember to bring it back every now and then just to play with it, just
I
because I
think.
find it interesting.
Well, and it is one of those things too where your physicality so changes your persona, right? So then if you have a character, right, like I tend to be a very legato person. And if I'm playing a
Mm.
character that's very staccato and heavy, that's like very different from the flowy, loose nature that I am every day, right? So just
Yeah,
doing that and exploring with that, you learn so many things about your character if it's appropriate for the story, right? Like
yeah, and I
so like
think you can use it to solve a moment, right?
yeah,
To like
right.
sort of intellectualize what is happening in this moment, and then I didn't mention what it is. Laban breaks down how we move in like different
Yeah.
essentially like a north, south, east, and west, basically, where it's like heavy, light, urgent, indirect,
Yeah.
um, pace. There's different, and there, so you can explore all of them and say like, well, I guess maybe I would be feeling this way through this moment, and see what that stirs in you, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, you could also use it as a way to like this could either take planning or it's something you discover where
Yeah,
it's like, oh, the character has been moving this way and now they're not, right? And that could be a subconscious way you could communicate the
sure.
weight of a scene, right? So
Mhm.
like if you have a scene that has no dialogue and it's all physical and you have to show a huge transformation, that is a very easy way that you could explore that, right? And start to get an understanding.
The that just you just made me think of the supporting actor in Honora. Just he has the scene at the end, but like the whole time he's basically like a um a mime. He's like he has no lines for the most part, but you he does this beautiful stuff in the background that you know exactly what he's feeling and thinking before he ever says his words later in the piece. And I thought that was a really cool marriage between filmmaker and actor, because but I think any other another movie, another filmmaking team would not have highlighted that. or that character wouldn't have been as, um, wouldn't have been built into that crescendo at the end.
Right. So we also had a couple of others here. So we had, uh, is it Voila Spolin?
Oh, Violet Spolin, she's
Oh,
like,
voila.
um,
Nice.
voila. She's the improv games,
Okay.
um, which, um, just another way of kind of, I think a lot of these techniques, ultimately it's about removing the piece of yourself that is judging yourself constantly
Yes.
and feeling inhibited and trying to act, as free as possible, right, without any of the insecurities that we carry, and so that any insecurity is from the character. um and so those games, there's a couple books, they're really cute, but obviously that spins off into all improv games, I think, basically. um and then I've never done the Alexander technique.
I've done some of
um
that.
but will you speak to that then?
Yeah, a lot of it, at least in my experience, was um, finding alignment and
Hmm.
removing tension.
Yeah.
So it was about finding uh, that like inner peace, but also like opening yourself up to impulses. There's also some breath work, and it kind of touches on some of the foundations of voice work.
That's similar to this method called Feldenkrais that I did a little bit
I
at
also did a
Steppenwolf.
lot of Feldenkrais.
You did, yeah.
I actually
I mean,
Feldenkrais is
well,
probably
you
oh so
went to a program that was pretty robust in that
yeah,
regard.
so our teachers were we spent 2/3 of our time doing movement, right? And then like we would spend and then we would rotate through like clown voice work and scene study, right? But a lot of it was movement. Um and we just were exposed to a huge variety of things. So another contemporary technique that we learned at my program was um oh what is it? It's here. Lucid Body. So,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. So Lucid Body, developed by Faye Simpson. It was taught at uh, NYU. I think that's where she is now. But she's also taught it at Yale, and she's taught it at Juilliard, and kind of a little bit everywhere. So it's growing. Yeah. So she's taught it all over in East Coast schools, and for me, that was like, and it's rooted kind of in physical energy centers of the body identified as chakras, right? But it is kind of, for lack of, I think, better terms, it's places in the body where you can feel energy in certain emotions, right? So it's, uh, and we used it a lot with emotional gesture, which is a Michael Chekhov technique, right? So like we would kind of build character through layers by like identifying parts of this character's emotionality. So, like if they're angry, there's a spot in your body that anger lives. So like where is that? Can you then go explore that, and then figure out how much of this is needed in this character's persona, right? Or is that something they're trying to hide? Right. So like we would kind of go through this where we would figure out you go through the different things, the energy centers of the body, and I don't want to um, not do it justice with a quick explanation. So maybe we'll have someone on. I've got some friends that teach it
oh,
down,
cool.
down the road, but so you're looking at these different energy centers, and you come up with choose three that kind of identify this person's like average persona throughout the course of the piece, right? And
Hmm.
then you might think about like, all right, so what are they trying to hide? Which might be like another three, like a shadow persona, or it's like maybe it's a shadow emotion, like they're really lusting after someone, but they're trying to hide it. But there's a moment in the script where you see it, right? But it needs to be present through the whole thing, and that's kind of like what it kind of gets at is like how you go through building this. So you would, in this case, you would use rehearsal to explore even inappropriate choices where it's like, okay, so like if longing is part of this character, but I have a scene where like I'm a boss, then and I'm disciplining somebody, let me do that through longing and kind of explore where that might be present. Is there like a moment where we can see it, and then you hide it entirely with the person's persona, right? But then when you, and by hiding it, you're just kind of not thinking about it, right? And then you're trying to just do the perfect version of their persona, and then when you come down and you rehearse it that way, and then when you go to film it, you do literally nothing, and all of a sudden you're like, all of this stuff is there for some reason. And like, so that was kind of how we approached it. We would like build layers and then try to hide them, and then let them kind of fight for presence in a weird way. But yeah, anyway, so that's a more modern one that we did. But yeah, so Feldenkrais, to get back on topic, um, from Tangent Man, is yeah, I did a lot of Feldenkrais, and I found a lot of a great use on it in terms of I mean, similar to finding a lot of overlap with Alexander, finding alignment, release of
Right.
tension, more efficient ways of moving. So I found that when I was doing a lot of Feldenkrais, my awareness of my body really improved a lot. And impulses then became like really facile and easy, and like, could be surprising sometimes, which was like, it's a weird sensation the first couple times that it happens, when you have an impulse that you're like, I didn't necessarily mean to do that, but uh, okay, we're here we
Hmm.
are.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, talking about all this stuff, it's so I guess that's part of the reason I wanted to be a part of this podcast, was to sort of reconnect with
Mm,
some of the early lessons and things I have, the blind spots too that I have as an artist. And I'm just thinking about all of these approaches are so beneficial for rehearsal, and rehearsal tends to be mostly for theater. And so the day-to-day life of an actor in Los Angeles, say, who's auditioning on self-tapes and maybe doing class, maybe doing um, a play or something, maybe making their own work, finding the time and luxury of time to
yeah.
to explore this stuff is it's so obvious that it's a practice. It's
Yes.
an art form that is a practice, and there's so many different things you could be doing with your time. And I think um making time for that, like honoring your practice of your artwork, and building that
Well,
into your routine
I mean,
is
we've
helpful.
been going now for like probably 45 minutes, and we haven't even gotten into like voice work or like other forms
Sure.
of, there are so many methods now and so many tools to training the actor, like Grokowski movement, right? Like there's a million of these things, and really, like, what I think we're all trying to get to with all of these tools is spontaneity, being
Hmm.
present, right? Imagining fully under given circumstances, and I think like fully letting the character take the wheel, right? So it's like really being present, and truly listening, which, like, listening is a full body exercise, right?
Hmm.
That's where you're getting your impulses from. That's like, you get everything from your scene partner. um, or if you're acting and it's late one night and your star went home to the piece of tape
Right.
on the, which, but there's a lot of overlap between that and self tapes, right?
Oh yeah.
But
And monologues,
and
frankly.
monologues,
Like
yeah.
it's you're generating,
Well,
you're
the,
self-generating, and
well,
yeah.
there's, I mean, monologues are a whole technique, and we did weeks on like, how do you do a monologue, and it's like, pick something in the room that you're sourcing things from, right? Whether it's like, if there's a plant on the table, like, that might be the thing that you're actually talking to. You need to connect to something. If it's not a
Yeah.
soliloquy where you're talking to the audience, then you need to connect to something that's relevant to the
Right.
stage, right? And you have to find ways to make that worth it, or to find those moments. Um,
Well, so what, like, of all the things we've covered and all the different types of training, like, what are the touchstones for you? What are the things that you gravitate toward the tool you pick up first, or the three different things that help ground you for an audition, or getting ready for a play.
Sure. Yeah, I I like to read the play a bunch. And like for me, a lot of it starts with really understanding the story. So we were taught we were taught like Stanislavski system, right? And then there's some additional things to that again that we haven't mentioned. Like Earl Geister created like actions, right? And he was the person that said like, it's not an action for every line. You have one thing that you're trying to do in this scene. You have one action that you're trying to pursue. There might be different tactics, different versions of that, but it's really kind of one thing that you're trying to do, right? And that's where your acting gets really clean and tight and everything like, oh, it's all lines up, it's all on theme. Michael Chekhov also did this with like we're talking about theme and then having like the super theme over the whole play. What is the thing that this person does? What is their mega want, right? That all of these other little things add up to. You kind of break stuff down that way. So like I tend to be more through analysis is like my first step. What is going on here? What is happening? And then it's trying to figure out, where is the character? Where am I? Where are we the similar? Where are we different? And then from there, I try to build an understanding for how we're different. And that's where I think a lot of these tools for me come into play, where it is then like, through rehearsal and through exploration of my own, it's like you start to be like, oh, this person kind of feels like they move in this particular way. And for me, a lot of it is physical and it's a lot of movement work. But again, that would make sense with my training. But so I like to look at physicality and like where does this stuff come from? How are they moving? Where do these things live in their body? And Lucid Body for me, it was like the first time I felt like I was given a paintbrush as an actor and I could make something. It was the first time I felt like I had tools to help me craft something other than like being myself. So that's kind of a very long answer to say like I start with analysis, movement work, and then I'll start getting into some prescriptive rehearsal for things that I need to work on to get to the character. But
Mm.
how about you? How are you thinking about things?
Um, I my go-to is the given circumstances. Just, I mean, I'm thinking about this from. It's been a few years since I did a play, so I'm thinking about this more from, I guess, an audition, for
Sure.
something. So, you don't get the you don't get the
I
whole
think
script to
I
read.
think that's an important um, thing to consider.
Yeah,
And again, like a lot of what I've talked about is for theater or for plays, right? Where
sure,
you
yeah,
have time. And some of it does apply still to auditions. Like if I got an audition, I would still go through a shorter version of these things, but you have so many unknowns that you have to like plug yourself in or take a choice, make a choice that's appropriate for the given circumstances, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that the moment before is the big one for me, where it's like, where am I coming from? What am I bringing into the scene? Um, and what do I want? Um, and trying to spend as much time as I can getting the specifics about that. And that's where for me, it's like, what do I want? And what happens if I don't get it? You know, building in those consequences. That's where the different techniques come in to
Yeah.
me, where it's like, okay, how can I make this believable for me in
Sure.
this short amount of time? What imagination work do I have to do, or what can I um, come up with in can I add to the circumstances to sort of buy in really quickly and just react from my instincts,
Yeah.
in a self tape, so that, oh, there is something on the line if I don't get the thing that I want in the scene. So sometimes it's like building in a secret, you know, or a kernel of truth. Like, I had a she's now the co-artistic director of the Steppenwolf Theater. Audrey Francis was a teacher of mine briefly, and she had this great story of like, just find that thing that's true in between you and the character. And you could do this exercise where what would have to change? What sequence of events would have to change in your life to be in this life?
Well, that's
Like, you'd have to get a
yeah,
divorce. You have
sure.
to, you move to another place, whatever, and just like get closer and closer to that. And you're like, okay, if I can find a shortcut there
Well,
to
yeah,
like
and
believe it.
I think that's our whole job, right? And like when you're when you have the luxury to pursue a character for a long period of time and really kind of get to understand them, you do come to this conclusion where you're like, that could have been me, right?
Right.
Where and you're just trying to get there faster, right? And like I think there is so the value in classwork, the value in doing plays is that you get to go deeper, right, into some of these things. But when you have that experience, you can go there faster the next time, right? So it's like
Yeah.
it,
Or you get very comfortable being further away from your, like,
yes,
moving your comfort zone expands, right? In terms of like, oh, I've performed truthfully and had an accent at the same time, and while using an accent or while using a limp or whatever. Like you sort of just, I don't, I'm just imagining expanding this, like your
yeah,
strike zone, basically.
yeah, you get more flexible in
Yeah.
those areas, more pliable, right?
I mean, I think ultimately for me, like that's the thing. If I, again, going back, it's like, how do I get to a place where I feel really confident and comfortable that I can go for a ride, like, and
Yes.
and that I will feel one way, and then Sean will say something, and that'll hit me in a new way, and now there's we know where we're going because we have the text, but at the same time, like, there's going to be a variety of little moments in between that are going to be really
Yeah,
interesting.
I mean the text is a map, but the map isn't the territory, right? Like
Hmm.
a map can tell you how to get from here to Chicago, but when you drive it, it's a totally different experience than when you previewed it on the map. So that's like how I tend to think of it. Or it's like hiking on a trail that's not been cut, right? And like with rehearsal, it's like walking over it again and again and again and again and again.
Oh
And it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
easier to hit these like, all right, I take a left at the mossy rock, you know, and it's like you kind of know where you are, and you find these like little moments that you can string together.
yeah, yeah, totally. What do you think? What do you think, or what's your go-to when something's not working, I guess? Like, or where do you find yourself you get stuck? Like, we all have our strengths and our weaknesses, sort
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah. So for me, obviously, like I've described like a fairly cerebral process. So that's something that I get stuck with a lot is um, being the like being a writer, you know, and thinking about story in a way that's maybe too far, or trying to intellectually understand the circumstances, but not physically understand the circumstances, which is a lot why a lot of what I described in my process is physical,
Mm,
because that's the thing that I need a little bit of extra help to get to. Like the
sure.
intellectual stuff, I'm that's easy for me to fall into. So like, and then the other thing that I think I have a hard time with is that like through the that like cerebral understanding, it's like here's the perfect version, and that's never the most interesting version. So again, kind of goes back to like a lot of what I was describing in my process is me trying to make up for some of these shortcomings or things that don't come as natural to me, which is like getting to a spot where I feel a little embarrassed, right? Like, or
Hmm.
a little vulnerable. Like, that's the sweet spot is when I'm kind of unsure. That's when I know I'm starting to get where I need to be. I like to be a little uncomfortable. And that's difficult. Right? It's a very difficult thing because sometimes you'll read something and you're like, oh, I get this. And then you just, I don't know. It's very, challenging. Sometimes it's easier than others, and you just
Sure.
know.
Yeah.
And sometimes instead of vulnerability, it's just like joy, and there is joy in vulnerability as well when you do it. But I get stuck. I have a hard time hurting people. I'm so aware, like I'm a bigger than average person, a stronger than average person, and because of that, I have um I'm I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. And that's like a Sean thing. And it's
Hmm.
an asset sometimes in my day-to-day life, but it does not serve me most of the time as an actor, especially when I'm getting, roles that are like Wall Street douchey boyfriend or something.
Mm.
It's like that's a person that doesn't give a shit and has a big ego. Um, so that that is sometimes a blind spot for me where I'll read something and I think I'm like, oh, all right, I see what's happening here, but really they're being a lot more malicious than I see. I'm like naive sometimes when I read something, and it's
Mm.
like, um, yeah, I just don't see people for being as awful as they can be. So sometimes that's something where I have to just really ask myself, like, um, how far does it go, right? Like, is it a more interesting story, or is it a more effective story? Is it a bigger contrast if this person is further than I think they are? And I have to
Mm.
like consciously put in those things and kind of be aware of what those blind spots are. Um, yeah, because like yeah, and that's just like me bringing myself to roles. It's like I'm a heartfelt, trusting person, but that's like there's very few roles where that's useful.
Mm. Gotcha. Interesting.
Yeah, and how about for you? Um, yeah, what are some sticking spots that you're working through?
Um, well, I guess I don't know. I mean, I think I'm very comfortable with emotions and vulnerability, and I'm very comfortable listening and sort of getting stuff from my scene partner. So when I have to do a self tape or I don't have the perfect, you know, partner or conditions and need to generate stuff, that's where I have to get really extra, put in extra work and creativity and sort of figuring out, okay, I can't control this situation. How can what is it in this moment that I can use here to give me what I need for the performance that or for the way the character is going to react. I think I'm very comfortable being in my skin. I have that same tendency to want to do the right thing, to be a good student and show my work. So I've challenged myself over the last few years to send messier and messier takes and just try to the idea of like in LA, I think in TV and film, the advice is pretty persistent is like bring more of yourself to it, bring you, and it makes sense because no one can compete with you. So if you are bringing a version of the character that is you, it will be different, even if you're saying all the lines and hitting all the beats. So figuring out how to do that is the thing that comes to mind, where it's like, how do I bring myself to the role, whether that's through my prep or through my interpretation of the character, and then also not like rough it up, show it that it is, I guess, it is authentic and not, oh, I think you want to see this, right?
Well,
Like
yeah,
type
I
of thing.
mean, we're inherently flawed, so we want to see those flaws, right? Where I think
Yeah.
if you if you trying to give the perfect version, it's like polished.
And you
Yeah,
can't do, and that's where for me, like improv has been huge
yeah,
because you are going to fail at it and you are going to make mistakes, and there might be something interesting in that. So um I'll use different improv games or ways to, and that helps personalize it a little bit too, I think. I don't know. One thing that comes to mind as we're talking about this is like, oh, what, let's say, hey, Sean, you get the next 3 months to study whatever you want. Like, we'll take care of the bills. The studio is paying for you to,
Yeah.
we're bringing back the studio system and like having a stable of actors like learn to ride horses and take dance classes. What would you want to do?
Oh, if I could do like learn any skill
No, like
or
or like
or do for
an
classes.
acting technique,
Oh, you know what? Honestly, for me,
animal work.
yeah, animal work is fun. I think for me, it would be voice work.
Yeah.
I think I would do. I mean, I've really enjoyed the Linklater work that I've done, and then um, less so the Fitzmaurice voice work, uh, just because that was a little bit more abstract for me. Um, Again, coming from a heavy science background, rooted in physiology and human anatomy, uh, some of their stuff didn't make sense for me, and I was thinking more than feeling in that circumstance. But um, mine would be voice work for sure because I think that's one of those things where you it's a way into the character and into the circumstances, like having your voice be truly present in the scene as well. Like you just get more honest um
Yeah. We all have our
reads.
like
You're not
tips or our strategies that we tie to our voice and like
yeah,
they're
or just like,
so great.
like, well, I know I should be grumbly here, or
Right.
it's like
Our
your
preconceived
preconceived
ideas.
notions or like an idea. Um, Although, honestly, the challenge there though is that's like it's a really great technique for theater when you are projecting. But in many
Mhm.
cases on film, if you are doing close up, you're doing a close up like this, right?
Right.
And then you're not even on. So it's like it's um but even still I think connection, right? The connection to your body with your voice in a way that, you know, truly shares how you're feeling, right? Like we put so much emphasis on how we're feeling, and it's like I want to make sure that that comes across in how I sound, right?
Hmm.
And not
Hmm.
like uh my manicured every day trying to hide how I feel voice.
Yeah, sure.
I think that would be it for me.
Yeah, I guess I would say like if it like the voice work sounds really intriguing and it's one of those things where I'm like, I think that might have to be closer to the top of my list of making a reality of just working with a voice teacher just to feel my full instrument again.
Yeah.
And uh and just be really connected to it because I don't need it as much in my day to day like it did when
Well,
you were doing theater. So
no, and
use it or lose
yeah,
it.
for
Um
sure. Well, and like I use my voice a lot, either for like very commercially sounding things.
mm,
So, but that's a manicured thing. Like if I'm
right.
doing voiceover work, that's something that's very controlled and measured, and you're offering takes. It's not spontaneous. So it's a different type of work. And I feel like if I'm doing a lot of that, it does kind of just train you to like, oh, it should sound like this. Right. And
Mhm.
that's also, I would say there's a lot of overlap between that and like giving the perfect version of something. Where again, if you free that stuff up, like when I was doing a lot of one of the things that surprised me most when I was doing a lot of voice work was how easy impressions were. Because you'd hear someone and you'd just be like, all right, I can now just mirror that back, like mimic it
Mhm.
really quickly. And like in ways that would surprise you. Um, but that's like I don't know, yeah, so voice work for me, I think. Yeah, I'll double down on my answer.
Nice.
But
Yeah, I think it would be cool to do uh like some animal work or viewpoints, something totally in your
yeah.
body and in your space, like to experiment, but I can't help but think like in my mind I would love for an acting class to exist. And if it does, someone should tell me, where you could do a performance on different lenses. So you could like there I'm thinking of like Heath Ledger in like The Dark Knight, and it's like he's got this he's in the wide and he's got this great clowning like curtsy moment, but he's in the close and it's totally a different thing. Or there's a Brando documentary where he just knew exactly
Yeah, yeah,
what lens meant, how big his frame was, and what he could do with that. And so I think that would be really fun to experiment like with all these techniques
yeah,
in the reality of seeing it on film and not necessarily like in a theater space.
for sure. That yeah, that'd be interesting. I think yeah, there's so much to well, and that's where like the technicality of camera acting comes in, right? Like you hear that a lot from movie stars, where like
Yeah,
they just know that the camera's their audience and they know how to work with it. And like,
and they know which lenses they really like and which
yep,
ones the director likes. Like they know they have opinions about it, and it's tough to pick up that knowledge in between little things because just no one has time to explain it to you on set. So it's
right.
like you got to mess around with your friends, I suppose. Um,
Yeah, I mean, and a good on-camera class could do that. I think they are tough to find though.
yeah, I don't know if they would go like so far as the lenses though. Like if they would just be like, you're close, you're medium, here's a different angles or whatever. Like I'd really want to know like what's a 65
Oh,
versus
sure.
30?
Like
Like and just
how
like
tight? Yeah,
how does
30.
that
Yeah,
feel to me?
sure. Yeah,
Um,
his 30's like full theater acting, whereas
yeah.
like yeah, a
And
65 is pretty tight ish, like a medium
you know,
close.
it
Yeah,
would just I
right.
think that would be fun to like do some scene work and like be like, all right, doing the same take. Now we're going on a tighter lens, and just see like don't change anything, change one thing, like
Like how do you
really,
translate it? Yeah,
yeah, really like make that make sense because when we're performing it, we don't get to see it until it's done, right? So
right.
um, you just have to pray everyone else knows what they're doing that it'll work, but
Or
um,
the director will tell you if you're being too big or something.
sure, yeah, but I guess to really know what that looks like, I think would be interesting. To watch someone else be on it would be really, oh yeah, look at that lens does this. But
Yeah.
anyways, I don't know we've got off. We I feel like we've covered quite a bit, and maybe one day we'll talk about or we'll interview like some other teachers or we'll try out a
I
class and
mean, this
like
is like
report back.
scratching the surface on this, and I feel like my performance has been messy because this is so there's so much to it, right? And it's such a fascinating thing, and
Well, and
this is
at the end of
definitely
the
a
day,
topic
it's
that's going to
like
come up again.
yeah, we're gonna at the end of the day, whatever works, which I guess
Yes.
brings me back to that tear stick line, which we'll
Yeah.
talk about, I suppose, artificiality and other things, and
Well, I
and
mean, tear
and
sticks
you
are, if there's a shot where you absolutely have to cry, they're going to guarantee that you cry.
yeah,
Like
and because you got to do it
whatever you need to do
however
your
many
job.
takes,
Yeah,
yeah,
whatever
yeah.
you need to do your job.
But
And like,
so yeah,
yeah.
there's certainly some different dimensions of this conversation we can keep having, but um, yeah,
All right, well, let's wrap up with some quick ad libs. What do we
sure.
what's bringing you joy?
I'm gearing up for soccer season. I went to see Angel City Football Club the other
Yep,
day,
yep.
and they've got some more games coming, and the World Cup's coming here to LA this summer, so that should line up with. I hear there's like a, a Daddy and Me soccer league that maybe I can join one day.
There you go.
How about you?
Yeah, for me, I'm a big fan of watches, and um, recently I got this guy here, which is a Belova Field watch. It's not an expensive watch, but it is a mechanical watch from an American company. This is the design they made for World War II, for D-Day. This is what they wore, and this particular watch is made by veterans that they teach the craft of horology, to give them something to translate their skills or to develop new skills, when they come out of the military. So that's what this watch is. So yeah, it's the Belova Field Watch. Yeah, it's a nice little mechanical watch, which means that if you don't wear it for a few days, it stops, and then you have to wind it or like get it moving again. So there's like all of the gears on the inside. So like it's charged by wearing it, and then when you move, sometimes you can feel this one not so much, like the hammer on the inside spinning it, but it's yeah, the Belova Field Watch.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for listening. If you made it this far, please like, subscribe, send us a comment at ask@supportingactors.com. Be part of the conversation. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Yeah, we're Supporting Actors, a podcast about the art, business, and craft of acting. I have been Sean Doobie.
Patrick Women.
And we'll see you next time, when we definitely break out that deer stick.
And a half apple for highlights.
Right.